Good evening all, I'm Aditi Lamba with the Tuesday night edition of South Asian News. Welcome to Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We are coming to you from our studio in New York City. Here's what's happening tonight in the coronavirus pandemic. Globally, we are looking at nearly 1 million deaths related to the novel virus, with more than 966,000 and 31.4 million cases. The United States has surpassed the sobering number of 200,000 deaths with at least 6.8 million COVID-19 cases. Experts fear for death toll number to almost double by year's end, with fatigue for social distancing and a push to get back into offices and schools seen across the nation fueling the new cases. Today, leading infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said that people at any age with underlying conditions are also at high risk category. It's not just the elderly who are at risk of a severe illness. This is happening while Minnesota, Montana, Utah, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and Puerto Rico set records for new cases. In Wisconsin, Governor Evers has declared a new public health emergency and has extended a face covering mandate into November to fight the flare-up of COVID-19 cases. More on science, the nation is focused on an efficient vaccine, with many pharmaceutical companies working tirelessly in their vaccine trials. The COVID-19 vaccine trial designed by Pfizer Inc. and its German partner BioNTech is on track to be the first to find out if its COVID-19 vaccine works. And with barely 6 weeks left before the crucial November 3rd presidential elections, eyes are on both President Donald Trump and Democratic presidential nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, who are neck and neck in states that could decide the outcome of this election. We'd like to invite both Democrats and Republicans to ITV Gold on their individual take on the election, the party's platform, and their address to the South Asian American and Indo-Caribbean communities. If you are running in these elections on local, state, or federal level, connect with us on your voice, your vision on events at itvgold.com. We hope to present opinions and perspectives of many. With that, it's time to begin tonight's episode discussing much on these upcoming elections and issues at stake, along with reopenings of schools. Here are the headlines. South Asian parents send kids back to school, featuring Megha and Bijal Vohra. Senator Luis Sepúlveda addresses Elections 2020 District 32nd New York State Senate. Mayor Sadaf Jaffer on Election 2020 and Systemic Racism, Montgomery Township, New Jersey. A lot more on the other side of the break. Stay with us on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be right back. And welcome back. I'm Aditi Lamba and this is Vision of Asia, Tuesday night episode of South Asian News. Today is National Voter Registration Day. With the election only 6 weeks away, this day encourages all Americans to register to vote and make their voice count. So we hope you have registered to vote, and if not, please do so. On this, President Trump's handling of coronavirus pandemic and subsequent economic downturn will play an important role in the outcome of the upcoming presidential and congressional elections, along with issues such as immigration, healthcare, women's rights, and much more. Nation's infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci has said that divisive politics in the nation are getting in the way of consistent messaging on the coronavirus, with elections coming close, making masks and vaccine a political issue. So what do we need to know when it comes to the South Asian American and Indo-Caribbean community, or just communities of color? And what is at stake for the diaspora? We spoke with New York State Senator Luis Sepúlveda, bringing much insight into these elections. Senator Sepúlveda also is running for re-elections in District 32nd and is advocating his platform, which promotes diversity, inclusivity, and protection of all, especially with the economic and healthcare ramifications of COVID-19. Here is Senator Sepúlveda. What kind of message does it bring of the White House? What kind of rhetorics do you think are happening when you're looking at their response to COVID-19?
Oh, I mean, it's just divisive. It's how did wearing a mask become a political statement?
Right.
I just don't understand that. I've researched some of the dealings of other countries. Let's say, for example, Taiwan, where the children chastise their parents if they don't have their masks on because they grow up wearing masks. Right? They've had some scares like SARS, and they've managed to handle it, but as well as South Korea. Why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we not make wearing a mask a political statement? So I think by Trump doing this, he essentially created a level of divisiveness that it was hard for him to go back. And as a result, 200,000 people.
That's a lot of people, and it's still counting in numbers. It's just very, very sad. What have you felt about President Trump's campaign rallies and the entire campaign itself and about the Republican Party? Do you think their supporters are happy and on their side?
You know, I don't really believe that there is a Republican Party anymore. Okay. This is the party of Trump. This is the self-centered, egotistical, narcissistic party of Trump. And unfortunately, sometimes in our political lives, we have to show political courage. And in the Senate and many people throughout this country, his supporters, when faced with complete and total irrefutable evidence of his lies, then they shift the discussion to justify it in other ways. It is amazing the level of lying, the way he refers to women, the way he refers to people that may be slightly overweight or just overweight or are military heroes. I mean, it's despicable. And for a party to support a president who's engaged in this kind of stuff is shameful. We shall see what happens now with the nomination of the Supreme Court, whether they'll stick to their guns when they said they would nominate during a presidential election because of Obama. We'll see what happens now with this one.
So important for all of us to discuss what's happening here and to actually understand the impact it could have on a person that's living in this nation. How do you compare this with how the Democratic Party has handled this issue or any issue in particular? What is your take on the campaign run of former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris? Do you think they're doing their job right in connecting with the brown and black communities?
I believe there's still work to be done.
Right.
Absolutely still more work to be done. I mean, even though Biden and several Republican candidates for the Senate are polling well, much better than 2016. I know people say, well, remember what happened with Trump and Hillary Clinton. But what people don't recall is that Trump was always within the margin of error with Hillary Clinton. On some of these races, especially swing states, he's beyond the margin of error. So that gives me solace. And also the fact that 50% of the electorate has already said that they've already decided who they're going to vote for. So that gives me solace that we're doing well. Now, amongst the Latino community,
right,
I think Biden can do much better. You know, the Latino community is composed of many different groups. You know, you have the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Cubans, the Venezuelans. Right. You know, as you have with the South Asian community, you know, it's the same thing. So it's not as monolithic. Cubans tend to vote Republicans because of the Bay Pig that happened so many years ago. They've remained loyal to the Republican Party, but Puerto Ricans tend to vote and Dominicans tend to vote Democrat. Biden has work to be. If he can solidify and take away votes from Trump on the Latino community, I think you'll have a runaway election. But there's still work to be done in that community. I can't really speak, and I think it's beyond me to want to opine that's outside of where I'm at, how he's doing in the South Asian community.
Right.
But, you know, I'm sure that that those that are involved in the body politic in that community are making sure that, look at us, you know, we're part of the diaspora now. Let's make sure that we all get involved.
From George Floyd to Breonna Taylor and the recent case of Jacob Blake, we continue to bring conversations on systemic racism in America with protests and demonstrations demanding an end to oppression of communities of color and accountability of law enforcement. What we have seen unfold in the last few months has been outrage, anger, and despair across the nation, questioning the deep-seated racism against people of color in America. As protests and demands for racial and social justice spread across, leaders and officials are coming to the stage addressing these disparities in the system and a need for real change which respects the dignity and identity of all living in the United States. Such an official is Mayor Sadaf Jaffer from the Montgomery Township in New Jersey, the first South Asian Muslim female mayor in the state of New Jersey and a huge advocate for inclusivity. Here is our conversation on what's required now to make change with Mayor Sadaf Jaffer. Mira Sadaf, Jaffer, thank you so much for being with us on ITV Gold. I know you're joining us from Montgomery Township. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. So much to discuss with you today. We are only 43 days till the presidential and congressional elections. My first question to you has to be, when you're looking at the South Asian diaspora or the Indo-Caribbean communities, what do you think should be our focus right now with these elections? And what are the issues that are pertinent to us?
Well, I think definitely it has to do with what is our vision of the inclusivity of the United States. What does it mean to be American? Who is part of that? Are we welcoming of immigrants, or do we think that immigrants don't belong here? So all of those things are really important. I think for South Asian communities, it's really important that we have a South Asian woman as a potential vice presidential candidate, because that means a lot for what we and our children, our families can accomplish in this country, and what representation we can have in government.
You know, while I still have you here on ITV Gold, I have to ask you about the ongoing race war in the nation, the continuous discussions about systemic racism and oppression. You know, you tweeted something which I'd like to share, which was vote Biden and Harris and end the long national nightmare. I would love for you to give us a little bit more on that comment, and just your general perspective on what's happened in the nation so far, and how do we truly tackle this issue, looking at the very recent case of Jacob Blake?
Mm-hmm. So, I honestly do think that from the Trump campaign kickoff, and definitely through the election of 2016, we have been in a long national nightmare, because as much as racism is there, and systemic racism is, by its very nature, systemic, it's built into our society, and we have to work very hard to parse it out and to be proactive in removing it. He kind of elevated racist discourses. At his kickoff for his campaign, he talked about how Mexicans are rapists and they're criminals, and some are good people. But that whole narrative. And then when it came to Muslims, that, he has said, I think Islam hates us and we need a complete stop of Muslim immigration to this country. And then we all know about his infamous, asshole country. We don't want from asshole countries statements. So he definitely sees the world in this very racist way, and it shows in so many of his actions. So I do think that that's a nightmare. And I think that under the Obama administration, we were making real progress. There was an attempt to, get rid of for-profit prisons, for example. That was an initiative of the Department of Justice. So I think, if we could get back to that, we were on a path that was healthier, that was more inclusive, that was about, undoing these problems. I just think we need to get back on track. And I think the best way to do that is to vote for Biden and Harris.
What kind of economic and social justice do you think communities of color need from the next president?
Well, first of all, it has to come with an acknowledgement that there is systemic racism. That's what I find so disturbing about the Trump administration, is that they want to pretend that there are no problems. And they will go so far as to say that they want to outlaw any sort of training around systemic racism in any government entity, in the schools. He recently, released this agenda to have patriotic education in the schools, and not teach the 1619 Project, which is a project by the New York Times to talk about the history of slavery. So to me, it's really a fascistic type of attempt to erase history, to ignore injustice and pretend that everything is fine. And that is just very unhealthy. I think what people need is they need more just policies. They need an enactment of those policies. They need their institutions, whether it is their school districts or their police departments, to represent them, to want them to be a part of the process, to not see them as the enemy. We have been trying to work on that. We've had multiple sessions with members of the Black community and our police department to talk about how we can improve communication, how we can improve trust. That, I think, needs to happen everywhere. Similarly, with our school board, there's been a lot of work being done in our schools to make sure that our curriculum is more inclusive. And that's a must, because that is how we uproot and like get rid of systemic racism by education and institutional change. And then obviously we need much more economic investment. That's something that I know, certainly Governor Murphy is working on in New Jersey, but we need that at a national level.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be back shortly. And welcome back. This is Vision of Asia, the South Asian news segment, and I am Aditi Lamba. Discussing now more on COVID-19 updates and measures, much is being debated about the return of students back to school, with school reopening confusing and concerning parents nationwide. Several schools in the country are now open for in-person, while others are opting for a hybrid setting or an entire complete virtual online system. Much to consider here are safety measures that schools are taking, with social distancing, temperature checks, washing hands, and wearing masks, along with changes to the ventilation system and other precautionary measures. The New York City yesterday, for the first time, reopened New York City public schools for up to 90,000 children with in-person classes. Only time will tell the impact of reopening of schools on COVID-19 cases. But tonight, we present to you two South Asian parents who have decided to send their kids back to school. Megha and Bijal Vohra, well-known fashion designers, both provided much insight into their personal decision to send their sons back to school. Here is our conversation with Megha and Bijal Vohra. I have you today to discuss something that's very important. It's kind of concerning nation, entirely, which is schools reopening and the decisions for parents to make whether or not to send your kid back to school. You are sending your kid back to school, so I'd like to know how that experience has been for you, and what made you and your husband decide to send your son back to school?
That's a great question. And I'm going to start by saying everyone has their own story. What I say is not right or wrong. And I think ultimately it comes down to what works best for yourself and your family. For me and my husband, we both work full-time jobs, like I'm sure many of you do. And two things. One, we physically do not have the time that we want to spend with our kids and sit down and homeschool. I think that is the number one concern. The second concern is, even if I did, I probably wouldn't be giving them the best that they could possibly get. And so we were faced with a decision that we had to make a few weeks ago on, are we sending our son back to school or not? And we decided to send him back. And we asked a lot of questions. We read a lot on it. And we felt safe with the decisions that they have made for the school. Kids are wearing masks. Kids are being separated as much as they possibly can. They're in school for half a day, and they're getting as much as they can. When he comes home, he has the opportunity to continue to do virtual learning. And so obviously we support him there as much as we can, but this was a decision we had to make because we both work.
And how many days is he going to school currently?
So his school is Monday through Friday, and he goes from 8:30 to 12:30, so it's half a day.
How has his experience been so far, Megha? Is he happy? And does he tell you if the kids are maintaining safe distance and they're washing their hands, taking precautions? How old is he again?
So he's 6 years old and he's in first grade. And yeah, so the first question is, he is extremely excited, right? And that's for two reasons. I think first, it's giving him a sense of routine. Right. These kids have been home for months, right, and their entire world changed. And sometimes they don't really know how to express what they're feeling. But you'll see it come out in different ways. They'll either throw a tantrum or they'll get upset. And I started noticing that about him when I never did before.
Wow.
And so I think that him going back has given him this sense of normalcy, this sense of routine that's come back in his life. And he's happy. When I pick him up, he's happy. He's smiling. I ask him about his day. He's like, his mask will be soaked, right? These kids eat their masks from the inside. So they're wearing their masks. They're washing their hands. I can actually feel it on his clothes when I'm changing him. His wrists are all wet on his clothes. So they're washing their hands, they're following the precautions, and they're doing the best that they can, and they're kids, so they're going to adapt.
What about their teachers, Megha? How have they been? And I'm sure you must see them taking a lot of precautions as well.
Yeah, I do see the teachers taking a lot of precautions. They have been amazing. These teachers, no matter where you are, I want to say thank you, because I can only imagine what this is like for them. It's a lot of change. It's a lot going on, but they are doing an amazing job. They're communicating with parents. They're making sure that they feel comfortable, right? They're already going through this all on their own, but they're making sure we're okay, which is amazing. So I see them when I pick up my son. I make sure to say thank you to them, because what they're doing is not easy. But they're doing great. They're wearing a mask. They're maintaining distance when I see them. Even when they speak to us, they're speaking to us from afar. And so I hope they know that they're appreciated. And I genuinely and seriously appreciate what they're doing.
And has there been any news about positive cases in the school yet?
Not yet, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But that day could come. And I think we're all kind of wondering when that may happen, what will happen if that news does come about. And I think they're already preparing for it, right? So half of the day, Aryan is doing virtual learning. And so in the event that there is a case and they do need to shut down, I think they're already ready for that with the virtual learning. It'll just obviously be a longer day for the kids.
Yes, for sure. Finally, what's your one advice to the parents right now on this or on anything else in, handling their children, taking care of them during COVID-19?
I think, my advice would be to release the guilt. I think as parents, we have guilt about everything. Am I making the right decision? Should my kid go to school? Is my kid getting the right? Do what you feel is right. And that's kind of what I have been brought up with anything about parenting. There's going to be a million opinions. Everyone has something to say. You've got to do what's right for you, right? At the end of the day, that is all that matters. You're going to take things as they come. You're going to navigate. We're going to figure this out. And eventually this will all be behind us. So you know what's best for you.
What are some of the precautionary steps that the school is taking in terms of their ventilation, in terms of masking up, in terms of checking for temperature? Can you give us an insight into what happens when Jake steps into the school?
Yeah, so that was one thing that we looked into, because my husband actually spoke to a few of the schools in the area, and he got on Zoom calls. As soon as we learned about the teachers and what was going on in the community, seeing what was going to happen, we actually had Anuj dial into a lot of the schools. And since he runs 2 ERs and he had to put the same kind of let's say, practices into place, he did the same thing for the schools, which made it a lot easier for us to feel comfortable with the schools. So what they were doing is constant hand washing. The schedule is they put up a plastic in between desks. So now kids don't have as much interaction, unfortunately, but they're still getting a lot of activities and one-on-one with the teachers. The teachers are keeping 6 feet of social distancing, and that's really important. They're constantly wearing masks. They're changing them throughout the day if they feel uncomfortable, and also just to make sure that there's constant breathing and they can get a break as well.
So do you know if there is changes in the ventilation system of the school?
But nothing with ventilation has happened. There is a lot of outdoors time right now. So we're seeing how it goes. I think that's the best that we can do. We really have to trust the education system, trust the communities, and that they're doing the right thing. That was something that was important when we were choosing if Jake should go back to school or not. And with the other 3 children, the reason we didn't send them is because at this point, I didn't feel like there was a need. Jake is learning very similar things that the other 3 kids are learning. So I felt like to put them in a different school increases the risk. And I didn't want to do that. Yes, it's going to be hard on me. Yes, it's going to be crazy at home with my 3 kids that definitely want interaction with other students and want play dates. But that's just something that I don't feel comfortable with right now. And I explained that to my husband. He was actually comfortable with sending the other children to school, but that was something that I decided for myself. As a mom, I didn't want to increase the risk. I wanted to take it one step at a time. And I think that's the right decision for me right now.
And this wraps up our show for the night. Remember to send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook @itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch many of our popular shows for free. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.